Jenny, and James, you're here as well. We'll do the toss for and against. So that you can show them what it is. Well, I think you all know how it goes, anyway, but just to go over it again, our timekeeper is on the way but hasn't arrived yet, so the leader of the jury will be doing it, and easy you all, I think you all know anyway. The home team, the academy, will call. You can call hot heads or tails. If you win, you choose for and against. If you lose, the opposing team have the right to choose for or against. Simple as that. Okay? Do you know what you're going to do?
Yes, let's pick heads.
You're here. Is that good enough? And we have heads.
Number is the heads, is that
You will
correct?
be going against the speech.
You will be going
motion.
against the motion. Against the motion. For BIC for the motion. You have half an hour to be back here. Okay? Thank you. Good luck, guys. Have you? As many sure you're well. Good morning, everybody. And on this awful weather, I'm delighted to see that everybody made it. It's especially two members of our team who got in here 5 minutes ago. The essential timekeeper and Anna. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you for the essential cup of coffee before you got here. Yeah, more than done. Also, a warm welcome to BIC, James. I think it's your first time you've been at the academy, is it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's very nice.
Yeah, so it's quite an amazing school, isn't it? Especially when it's got 2 parts, and some people go to the junior school instead. Well, thank you very much indeed. Just a reminder, as I do at each of these debates, as you already know, of the other schools taking part, 10 schools taking part in all that. Agora, Baleares, Montessori, San Cayetano, Queen's, Mallorca International, Green Valley, and the new school that joined this year, which is King Richard's III. As you can see, they're all here. And of course, we've got all our sponsors. We've got 9 sponsors this year. Our new sponsors got in this, and then we've also got Pictures, Imperial Properties, MCC, that's the tennis club in Santa Ponsa, Wave Radio, represented here by Izzy, although she's a judge today, and Ticket Travel, Mallorca, Bulletin, Phoenix, and IBEX. So we're very lucky to have so much support. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. And of course, my wonderful group of volunteers have been through all the hail and rain and storms to come today. But thank you very much for giving all your time, your energy, your support. You're marvellous. Before we just start, just a little reminder, phones off or silent, please, and you all know no disturbance during the actual debate. What have we got here? There we are. Right, let's introduce the teams here. Here we have the home team, Indy, Sienna, and Pinkley, and visiting BIC, Marlo, Hugo, and Norway. Welcome, and a special welcome to Sienna, who stepped in at the very last minute. Thank you very much for that. The motion today, it's already been commented, it's quite an interesting one. As Europe prepares for war, environmental projects will lose government support. As Europe prepares for war, environmental projects will lose government support. The Academy won the toss and have chosen to debate against the motion. BIC will be defending for the motion. So let's get started. Over to Timekeeper Louisa. You've just walked in the door. Are you all ready? Thank you very much. Let's get started.
Okay, good morning teams. You will have 15 seconds for your points of information, POIs. Please make them short, clear and precise. And it's very helpful if when you put your hand up you say points of information or POI. Because sometimes I can't always see if there's a big sign or you're short. And the team in favour of the motion starts.
Honourable judges, esteemed opponents, and dear guests, something that I believe many of us can agree on is that war is a sensitive subject. Not only does it have life-lasting impacts on all of us, it causes many priorities to be reconsidered and weakens resources environmental projects are often the first to be sacrificed. Today, my team and I stand before you to address a difficult but crucial truth. As Europe prepares for war, environmental projects will inevitably lose support. I will discuss the environmental effects of war and lack of global cohesion. Hugo will talk about the distribution of finances and alternative uses of resources. And Naomi will share the government shift to survival mode. In times of any conflict, geopolitical tension, or war, governments shift their focus on security, defence, and military readiness. The uncomfortable truth is that environmental projects are viewed as secondary, not because they're not important, but because political pressure forces leaders to prioritise immediate threats, and with that, the voice of the planet, which cannot speak for itself, becomes overshadowed. As fear grows, global cohesion shrinks. International cooperations on many topics weaken, including climate change agreements. Nations naturally become less willing to share resources or commit to long-term environmental goals when they feel immediate safety is under threat. The disruption and individual focus on each country's agenda to protect its people means that environmental projects, already struggling for funding, will lose political attention and financial support. The one major factor fought by war was to protect its people and planet because against the environmental issues we all face. This sadly is going to rapidly decline because of governmental blindness in times of war. The direct environmental impact of preparation for war is shocking.
You stated there's a lack of funding for environmental projects, but Europe actually spends 1.5% of its GDP annually on military support, but 2% on environmental support.
Thank you for that point of information. This is something that Hugo will be addressing in his speech. This sadly is going to rapidly decline because of governmental blindness in times of war. The direct environmental impact of preparation for war is shocking. Increasing training, deployment and production all lead to massive emissions, heavy fuel use and widespread pollution. Aircrafts, tanks and naval vessels consume alarming amounts of fossil fuels. Forests cleared for military bases, land destroyed for testing grounds, air polluted by endless sources, and the list goes on. This just shows how, before a single shot is fired, the environment still suffers. Once the war begins, it just gets worse. Armed conflicts destroy ecosystems, contaminate soil and water, and increase carbon emissions on a massive scale. As we have seen from historical data, this only reinforces how the governments have been consistently neglecting environmental projects in times of war. As this happens, the food shelves struggling, we all witnessed the food shelves struggle. We all witnessed this during COVID-19 recently, and that was only a pandemic, not a war. Proof of the above is echoed by the United Nations intervention after understanding decades of war and energy abuse around the planet and the environmental effect it has had. This
information. You're saying that environmental projects will lose funding, but I feel more that you seem to be stating that actually the support for will use environmental materials. How is that linked to losing funding for these projects?
These are the causes. Thank you. But these are the causes that are going to happen afterwards. This is a testament to the setting up of the UN Environmental Programme and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Collaboratively, they've pushed over 15,000 articles regarding these issues. By ignoring these environmental responsibilities, there will be repercussions, as seen by the penalties imposed on Russia for ignoring environmental obligations. The environmental impact is severe, long-lasting and irreversible. If Europe prepares for war, the environment will suffer immediately and the ecological recovery will take generations. Thank you.
First of all, we'd like to give a large thanks for the generous change of date. It's very, very much appreciated. Honourable Chair, respected judges, and my worthy opponents. War. It's a word that casts a shadow across Europe long before the first shot is fired. Many fear that as nations strengthen their defences, they'll abandon their great promises, that tanks will take priority over trees. But I stand firmly against this motion. Europe's environmental progress isn't a fair weather dream. It's the backbone of the future. Energy, food, and climate sustainability aren't distractions from security, they are the security. Today, I will be speaking about how Europe's environmental commitment runs deep. Sustainability is Europe's real defence, as the environment contributes more to peace than war ever could. Our second speaker, Sienna, will address how advancement in environmental projects are a necessity. And our third speaker, Feng Li, will speak on how youth advocacy will cause internal conflicts which the government is avoiding at such a vulnerable stage. Europe isn't just focused on green, it's built on green. The European Green Deal, passed in 2024, legally binds all EU countries to cut emissions by 55% before 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. And almost 1/3 of the EU's entire budget must go directly to climate and environmental work by 2027. Because these commitments are legally binding, governments cannot simply shift funds elsewhere, even during crises. The structure of the Green Deal guarantees security for environmental investment no matter what. Hydrogen trains in France, wind farms in Denmark.
Have you considered the fact that many organizations are considering loopholes to avoid legal bindings?
Do you have an example of one of these loopholes?
Yeah, for example, well, that's not even, but I think Selfie, a company based in Germany, has avoided one of the loopholes. So,
Thank you. Hydrogen trains in France, offshore wind farms in Denmark, and solar systems in Spain. These aren't just experiments, they're the engines of Europe's economy. Here, I have two jars: defence spending and green investments. Europe spends roughly 1.5% of its GDP on defence spending and around 2% on environmental and climate protection. Even in times of military tension, Europe's large investments remain on the planet. Because long after the battle ends, we still need food, fuel, and clean air. These jars don't just show money, they show priorities. True defence against conflict is not just about weapons, it is about resilience. When war in Ukraine exposed Europe's energy dependence, the EU didn't abandon green policy, it doubled down. The Repower EV plan accelerated renewable energy, wind, and hydrogen production to end reliance on Russian gas. A solar panel doesn't just power a home, it frees a nation from foreign fuel. A wind farm doesn't just generate electricity, it protects independence. The green agenda is the security agenda. Environmental projects provide jobs, stability, and innovation that last generations. Europe's green industries already employ over 5 million people per year. Meanwhile, war industries, they destroy more than they create. And while wars are temporary, the climate crisis is permanently fought in every drought, flood, and wildfire. Climate-related disasters have already cost Europe over 150 billion since 1980. When governments fund green projects, they're not choosing between survival and sustainability. They are investing in both. Without food security, clean water, and stable energy, no nation can survive any conflict. A continent can rebuild after a war. But you cannot repair a lost ecosystem or fill up a dried out river, because this is why Europe continues to pour money and talent into sustainability. This isn't about politics, it is about existence. The environment gives Europe food and a future, but war only takes these things away. This is why I stand firmly against the motion. Thank you.
continue, I would like to circle back from a point made by Indigo and how funding is not the same as resource usage. So about that, the motion is not directly about funding, it's about government support, which includes resource usage and monetization usage. Anyway, continue. Smoke blankets the horizon tanks. The horizon. Tanks rumble in muddy waters as they approach the soldiers of Ukraine. Children cry in the rubble where used to be their homes. Bullets go flying and napalms tear holes in the steel brigade, but the mechanical troops overrode the Ukraine soldiers. The silence after shelling is deafening, and in that silence we hear the cost of hesitation. It could all be avoided if we invested in the effort, just that bit more. So why don't we? Why don't we invest in them? Seriously, pivot our budget from environmentalism to military. Of course we should. Otherwise, should we let our soldiers die in ditches for nothing?
Bits of information. But can these funds not come from any other source, for example, taxes? Why take it out of environmental projects?
Yeah, sure, but if we take it out from other projects, we can only take out so much. We're gonna have to
We can also take out so much from environmental projects.
Yeah, but that's still, you're still losing
Sorry, excuse me, it's a discussion.
Right. We're still losing government support on environmental projects, even if they take away some of that money. Otherwise, should we let our soldiers die in ditches for nothing? Is that something we really want to do? Should we let our soldiers die in ditches for their countries just to become some puppet state? Of course not. Before moving on to my argument, I'd like to discuss some points from the opposing side. So Indigo mentioned the legal bindings of some of the European directives, for example, the Green Deal, and then the climate law, I think you mentioned. Anyway, so that doesn't take into account the shady dealings that goes behind the curtains. Example, I mentioned a company called Cellophane, which has been posted in some news sources about its behind curtain and dealings, which try to avoid and create a loophole in the system to avoid paying environmental projects. Okay, continuing to my first argument, which is clear, countries must emphasize military spending, even if that means reallocating from environmental projects. In June 2025, during NATO summit, all members agreed to raise military spending from a minimum of 2% to 5% of their GDP. This is the largest increase since the Cold War. An unbelievable amount. For sure, to turn the tides of war. The 800 billion remarked for defense under the rearmed European plan dwarfs environmental budgets, leaving only a fraction for climate projects. This is not neglect, it's necessary. It's necessary for countries.
If local environmental projects are abandoned, how will soldiers survive on local resources?
By import. It's not neglect, it's necessary for a country's survival. They need soldiers, of course. In 2024, a global military spending rose by 9.4% on average, the fastest increase in decades. As mentioned earlier, Europe alone committed over 600 billion more annually. Compare that to climate budget, which still remains a fraction, a tiny bit. It's the bottom of the barrel. The imbalance is stark, but it compares with reality. The reality is that countries need that money for military. Otherwise, what will happen? They will lose their land, and they will their whole country will become a puppet state. Let us not wait until it is too late. Let us act now, not with hesitation, but with conviction.
Honorable judges, opponents, and timekeeper. Today, I stand firmly against the motion that when Europe prepares for war, environmental projects will lose government support. This assumption behind the motion implies that war and sustainability cannot coexist, and that defense spending automatically means abandoning green projects, but this view is outdated. As Hugo mentioned, that soldiers, when environmental projects are cut, that they'd rely on imports. However, this would be unrealistic because alliances are broken, therefore imports are realistic. In modern world, security and sustainability are deeply connected. As Europe prepares for conflict, it won't cut off environmental efforts, it will strengthen them. Because a greener Europe is more independent, secure, and resilient, which is what environmental projects have worked for, which Fenley will expand on. When imports of oil, gas, and other resources are forced on domestic and sustainable solutions. Europe has already seen this. In 2022, the Russia and Ukrainian war led to an energy crisis. That shifted them towards renewable energies, not away from them. The EU Repower Plan was designed to stop intense dependency on Russian fossil fuels by expanding solar, wind, and hydrogen energy, which was explained by the European Commission. This shows a trend. When external supplies become unavailable, renewable energies secure priority, which means it's a lifesaver for them. Governments realize that true independency depends on producing clean, local energy that can't be weaponized by foreign powers. So rather than losing support, environmental projects gain importance and urgency as they become the key for energy usage and military preparation. War limits imports and exports, which means nations must rely on their own land and water. That's when protecting the environment becomes essential. Governments will invest in sustainable agriculture and efficient use of local resources to maintain food and industrial stability. This is how governments are investing in environmental projects. A polluted river and ruined farmland weakens soldiers, weakens nations. So governments have no choice but to support environmental projects that protect these critical natural assets. When self-sufficiency becomes a necessity, environmental protection becomes a strategy. Protecting the environment isn't a distraction from war preparation. It's a part of it. Governments will rely on environmental projects, hence not cutting their funding. The NATO website states how they have been progressing in environment and military collaboration ever since. Yes.
You mentioned a lot the finances and how the environmental projects are being funded, but not about the resources they need for like the metals and whatever.
What do you specifically mean?
No, you mentioned that environmental projects need money, and that's great, but they also need like metals. If you want to build a wind turbine, you need rare earth metals, steel, and whatnot. You need resources, not only money.
Well, yeah, but when countries have these, it will save them time, and also it will quickly gives them these resources that they need. So, as Europe prepares for war, environmental projects won't be discarded. They'll evolve. Resources
resource management will demand sustainability, and national security will depend on generations of environmental resilience. So I leave you with this question. Is a greener Europe really a weaker one, or a stronger one? And a more secure Europe? I believe that it will definitely make us stronger. Thank you so much.
Honorable judges, honorable opponents, honorable timekeeper. I stand for this motion because when Europe prepares for war, governments shift into a short-term survival mode. In this mindset, long-term environmental projects are the first to be delayed or deprioritized. My argument is pretty straightforward. War creates urgent, immediate demands. EPs are long-term investments, and in crisis, the urgent stuff always replaces the important. In other words, war forces governments to redirect money immediately. Defense spending becomes non-negotiable. The government spends money on weapons, on ammunition, on cybersecurity, and on emergency energy supplies. So basically, costs that must happen now. I have an example to show this. Okay. Environmental projects take years before they show results, so they naturally lose funding when budgets tighten under pressure. And history actually proves long-term projects get cut in crisis. In both world wars, governments reduced funding for welfare, infrastructure, and development to focus on survival. The same pattern appears in every major European crisis.
Point of information.
Yeah, this is.
Do you have an example to back up your point you're making, that it occurs in multiple European crises?
Yes, actually. So in both world wars, both in World War I but also World War II, especially in World War II, most of the money was spent for building weapons and ammunition, and a lot of the social and environmental funding was cut. Okay. Another thing I would like to point out is that war preparation causes energy emergencies, which pushes Europe back to fossil fuels. War increases energy demand immediately. Renewables cannot scale overnight, but fossil fuels can deliver power supply super duper instantly. After Europe cut off its supply from Russia in 2022 to support Ukraine, countries across Europe very quickly reopened their coal plants, and they delayed green transitions and improved of emergency fossils. If that happened during an energy crisis, it is even more likely during war preparation. The last, but in my opinion, definitely not least.
Point of information.
Yes.
If war damages our environment, wouldn't that mean that environmental projects are essential?
Well, yes, but the thing is that if the people, so not just the public, but also the government, so for example, political speeches, if their attention is focused on the war, they won't pay attention to the environment. So another thing I would like to point out is that war also shifts political and public attention away from climate, which is the point I was getting at, or trying to get at.
Some information.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the war between Ukraine and Russia, you said that they used unenvironmentally friendly ways of supporting the war. But what about the repower EV plan that was actually used to accelerate environmentally friendly electricity, energy? That was introduced for this war.
Yeah, that's very good. That's an example of how. I don't know. Anyway, environmental progress relies on visibility, public pressure, and constant political focus. Climate commitments stay alive because they are actively discussed and demanded by the public. But in a pre-war context, the convo of the public narrows almost entirely to security. So media coverage, political speeches, and people in general shift all their concerns towards defense, alliances, and immediate threats. And then climate becomes a secondary topic, and not the first primary discussed topic. Not because people stop caring, but because the collective attention is overwhelmed by fear and urgency. And in that time, governments can cut or temporarily suspend environmental spending without facing backlash from the public, simply because people are too focused on the conflict to notice.
Projects. Because cutting funds is dangerous, short-sighted, and weakens our countries long before any battle begins. Which is why we know it won't happen. Europe cannot prepare for war if constantly interrupted by internal conflict. If the government decides to cut our fundings after our lifetimes of hard work, how will people feel? Betrayed. How will people react? With anger. Our leaders cannot afford to lose our sense of unity the very moment we need it most. Nowadays, we rely on the environment so heavily. Saving it is the backbone of our future. The environment is the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we consume, and the base of our communities. Hence, cutting environmental projects now wouldn't just be careless, it would be reckless. It would make our countries, overall Europe, weaker. If citizens are struggling to survive, angry at their leaders, and watching their environment fall apart, no army can save that nation. So we will not let our environment be forgotten. Greta Thunberg. She participates in meetings with presidents about environmental restoration before and after war. Autumn Baleares. She grew petitions to enforce laws on oil transport and spills and spoke at UN events, as you can see. And Alexandra Villaseñor, who is working to build coalitions which challenges climate policies and militarism. And these young people didn't just make speeches, they forced governments to listen. Young people today have power like never before on social media, in communities, and in politics. But why does this matter? Well, let me clarify. If our hard work is being threatened to being thrown away, we have our own environmental leaders who will represent us, defend us, and fight for us until governments listen. Our European governments are smart, they are aware of this, they know this. So they know that they can't strip away our hard work, not at the cost of protests and possible civil war and general anger.
But during a time of conflict, such as preparing for war, won't the attention of people immediately shift to the immediate threats?
Well, the environment is also an immediate urgency, and as Sienna and Indy has explained, it can be used in war. So supporting environmental projects will help militarism, hence help with the overall conflict and stress of the public. An example for this would be the LIFE program, the largest environment support system we have in the EU. It was recently threatened with their budget of 5.5 billion euros being cancelled, hence their 133 planned programs. Yet the European Parliament was convinced not to, as people rose to speak of this attention, and because it was so important to the public health, as these projects would take decades to be taken in place. As Hugo has mentioned, there is an increase of 2% to 5% in GDP military preparation. And this is an additional 360 billion euros to reach the 3.5% mark, which will need to be found each year. Yet what he didn't mention is that the modern day workers and youth are enraged, and Spain and UK and many more places have already refused to set that goal because it is unreasonable and it causes so much civil anger. So many might still say that young people don't belong in politics, they don't have enough of an impact. But Gen Z, we are workers, activists, organizers, the very people in this room watching the speech, presenting the speech. We are the future. We are inheriting this planet, and we know it. We take care of it, and in this very moment,
No.
we are proving my points of youth advocacy being strong, because we are currently debating about the environment, about our future in a political manner. So cutting environmental funds grants too much of a risk for our government in such a vulnerable time. So it is not plausible in a time where society needs to be united. Thank you.
Well done, teams. You have 2 minutes to prepare for your summing up. Thank you, teams. The team against the motion starts, and you have 2 minutes to present your conclusion.
First of all, I would like to say thank you very much for the audience, judges, timekeeper, and fellow debaters for being here. This is a very tough motion, as it is very political and has a lot to do with our future. Our future as in politics, as debaters, and in our general lives. I would like to raise a point that Hugo's POI that he asked Indy to do with a loophole was only one example and was not sustained in his own speech. I don't think he provided enough proof of several loopholes and did not have to do with what Indy was explaining. As Indy was explaining how the environment contributes to peace way more than war does. Yes, Marlo explained causes, and we responded with Indy explaining that proof of otherwise of how these causes are affecting it. And Indy used stats instead of just logic. As the government is unpredictable, we can't assume what it does and what it works on. And yes, as Indy POI'd Hugo, he responded, we can only take so much from other projects, but there are actually a lot more we can do, because as many environmental projects are working on being non-profit, there isn't that much funding overall we can actually take. So we could instead introduce fiscal and monetary policies, increase taxes on luxury businesses, which can afford it much more than environmental projects. And as Hugo states, again, on his GDP, he left out what I mentioned about the cancellation and many countries already refusing that point. Thank you.
Okay, so we all know that during a major crisis, during a time of conflict like war or even just preparing for war, everything is pretty uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. It's outside of the norm. Not every day is war. It's not It's not a first time. We've had a lot of wars, but you know, things are urgent and there are immediate threats, like threats that are right before us. And environmental projects are not one of these things. They're very, very important, but they are long-term. They take a lot of time, and people like Greta Thunberg who support these, it's very important that we keep supporting these environmental projects. However, war imposes a very, very large risk. It imposes a risk on our lives, right? And while everyone is afraid and everything is urgent and chaotic, the public shifts their opinion totally towards the war, right? Because that's what's happening. All the news are going to be flooded with the war and preparing for the war, and money is going to be invested not permanently into preparing for the war, but they're going to be invested right now at what's most important is war that's threatening everyone's lives. Yeah, and during war, like we saw with Europe, they need to often take measures that aren't the best for the environment or for the climate, but that's what they have to do to prepare for the war, and that's most important because all our lives are at risk. So, for example, switching back to fossil fuels, that's very bad. We're drilling holes into.
Thank you.
Okay.
And it's really interesting to listen to. And I'm sure there's divided opinions both between yourselves and those sitting here in the audience. At this time, you know, I don't think, Sienna, I don't think you were in the last debate. I'm not sure, but anyway, you all were? Were you all in the last debate? Well, or not, this is the time where you can forget actually you had to debate for or you had to debate against. You, within the team, there'll be several of you might have different opinions, and I'm sure in those sitting out there, there are a variety of different opinions. And we had a political stance clearly from one side and coming along the same thing another. In other words, one of the first debates have actually entered into the world of politics and their capacity to affect how we live and our opinions of what we are doing. So, what do you think? Is anybody would like to state that you actually had to this morning debate something you didn't believe in, which does happen?
I'm quite compelled by both of the arguments, I think. I definitely agree with what I'm saying, and I think it's all fact-based. But also, obviously, in the short term, a war is a much more pressing matter than sustainability in some cases. And things like fossil fuels are inevitably going to damage the environment, but are what fuel the war. But I think both quite strong arguments.
A bit down in the middle, you could call it.
Yeah.
What do you think over here? Yes?
Honestly, I think I tend to, if it was my personal opinion, I would tend more towards the against side, especially after hearing the last Bentley's seeing her poster about Greta Thunberg. I think as long as we have those people, they're never really, like, obviously I do believe what I said about public attention. It's going to be shifted towards war. But I think as long as we have all these people and like Gen Z, the new environment, the new generation to care for the environment, I don't think we'll ever really lose that support for the environment.
I see you better over here. So you're going down the middle, but then again, you haven't actually mentioned that we do actually today have war in Europe. We hear about it every day in the press, what's happening in Ukraine. Does that, have you thought of that and what is actually happening in that country at this moment in time in your decision? Yeah, what did you
I didn't think the motion, when I first read it, I was very confused on thinking what war exactly, because there are many wars ongoing in the world.
Yeah, there are.
Europe needs to prepare itself. So, which is why I did against, while doing research, I was a bit torn against, because I think it really depends on the current situation and the exact urgency that's ongoing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I felt like the argument about Gen Z is pretty good and is like morally right, and it is true that there are figures in the Gen Z community who are fighting for environmental stability, but I feel like there are not enough actual evidence of them being successful, because I feel like these environmental projects and the decisions, the political decisions, they are way more controlled by way more powerful figures like Donald Trump, like, I don't know, Vladimir Putin. Those are the people who are affecting our environment actually, and they too often, sadly, neglect and overlook and silence the voices of the people, and they just have so much power that it's
a bit ridiculous, but they can ignore, and they do ignore, to be fair, most of like democratic and more, I guess, left-wing environmental policies. So I actually would say that the for argument is more realistic. It doesn't mean it's right, but I just feel like if we're talking about what's actually happening right now, I feel like the for argument, sadly, is the reality.
Ladies, would you like to make a comment on that? I see you nodding.
I do think that right now, a lot of the focus towards trying to win the war is trying to do it in the most environmentally friendly way possible. Because we know the consequences and effects of our decisions now will impact further generations not so far in the future. And I did think that when they were pointing out the examples of World War I and World War II and how military protection, having that quickly implemented was a priority back then, regardless of the environmental costs, is a bit of an outdated view now. And as we've seen with newer wars, like the Ukraine-Russian war, we're focusing on trying to be energy independent. That way we can keep focusing on our own sustenance and keep going without being reliant on outside powers. So right now, the way that we think of war preparation, the way that we think of winning a war is by doing it in the best way possible that won't affect further generations down the line in a negative way.
Is there any best way of winning a war?
To not
Anybody
have
want to
war.
work out what the best way is? I think they're working hard on it, but they're not having much success at the moment. And would you like to come back on that statement, one of you? I mean, Hugo, you came up with quite a lot of definite statements that you may or may not agree with what people are saying here. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so you were saying that Russia and Ukraine are trying to be more environmentally friendly in their approach to war, but there are so many statistics that have gone against this. Like I showed the judges over there, they faced repercussions. Russia faced repercussions because of how much CO2 emissions they released.
Oh no, I'm focusing more on EU's approach to helping Ukraine, not Russia itself. Because we know that Russia is trying to go a quick way to win the war and increasing fossil fuel emissions. But in respects to EU and how they're trying to support Ukraine, it's trying to be in an environmentally friendly way.
And what about the decision, you brought it up, what about the decision of Mr. Trump across the water that is increasing the armaments, fossil fuels, he's not interested in the world, or what the world is doing to save the environment. In theory, he's only in power for another 2 years or something, but I don't think anybody really believes that. He's a very powerful man at the moment, whether we like it or not. I'm sure most of the world isn't in agreement, but he's there and he's got the biggest budget and the biggest army. Is that something that is going to affect us over, let's say, the next couple of years, next 3 years? James, do you want to say that?
Yeah, no, it's probably, I think he's like the orange elephant in the room. I'm surprised that it wasn't more. Because clearly what has happened is NATO spending has been forcing European countries to increase their spending. That's gone from 2.5% to 3.5%, it's wanting 5%. And that spending will obviously is going to impact on welfare, it's going to impact on environmental projects. And when it comes to public opinion, it's the welfare that will be the one that the public will go for, unfortunately, rather than environmentalism.
That's a point which we haven't mentioned. Good point.
Yeah, which I think is an interesting point. And obviously his views towards fossil fuels, his views towards windmills, of course, which have killed many whales and birds and eagles. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very interesting point. And sadly, the EU is a powerful bloc, but the way we've been behaving as a little poodle towards Trump is kind of at times quite saddening. Yeah.
So there's an argument that from coming back to your point, I think, Benji, that the citizens, if you like to call it, not just the youth, the citizens, during the time when war is approaching, or indeed is actually happening on our territory, that rather than going for armaments, they would, or the welfare state, which we all live off one way or another, not to mention education and health, they would prepare welfare rather than the environment. If they got a choice, let's say, they might not have, but let's say the citizens have a choice.
I think that also had a lot to do with both Sienna's and Lee's point. That was a big link between all of ours, is the fact that supporting environmental projects will support the military, like preparation and such, because, I mean, partially at least, because it is possible to, the production of weapons and general equipment, the production of it could be at least renewable. And I think that that's just like one example of how people might try to incorporate environmental projects into militarism. Hence, the funds that go for defense spending, a big part of defense spending will interlink with the environmental projects itself.
Sorry, you mean you're talking about in the decisions that the national governments will make, or indeed United Nations, whatever,
Yeah.
or Mr. Trump. Yeah, that these decisions will be, the defence decisions will be taken hand in glove with the environmental ones.
I mean, I do think that with time, it's definitely going to interlink more and more. Like, they're going to combine these two, defense spending and environmental spending. It's already like interlocking much more, and with the years, it's definitely going to keep collaborating.
What do you think over the BIC team? I'm sure you've got an opinion about that. Or are you thinking it? Hugo, come on, let's hear from you, sir. You made a very impelling speech, so you've definitely got opinions.
No.
Oh, sorry, and otherwise there's another. But it's time for it to hear from yourself.
I don't really know what to comment, though. Yeah. I don't know what to say.
Would you like to say something then?
Yeah. No, I just thought that about the choice between environmental and welfare. I sadly have a lot of, like a bunch of friends or even distant family members who live or used to live in Ukraine, and when they wake up to aerial sirens every morning or every other day, I can assure you that they don't think about green energy. In this moment, when their drones are attacking their cities, they're blowing up buildings, people are dying every day, they're not thinking about green energy. They're thinking about, I don't know, evacuation, getting away, like, I don't know, bringing down those drones, somehow protecting the people, I don't know, more hospitals, more just help in the front lines. They are turning to welfare, that's just a fact. And I think if we were in their situation, I really hope nobody will ever have to experience that, but it's kind of obvious.
That's a very good point, very good. Yes?
Yeah, I actually wanted to add on to what Darius said about attention, but also morality. I was talking to my dad yesterday at dinner. We had like kind of a mock debate a little bit, and we were talking about how Germany in 2022 sanctioned Russia, right, to show their support for Ukraine, and they cut off the natural gas coming from Russia, and that was the right thing to do. That was, you know, the moral thing to do, but it had major. It was really bad for their environment and their economy also.
Yes, Sienna.
Well, I just wanted to add on what she said. That at first I was like, okay, like I want to do 4 as well, because I just thought that like war, you have to take care of yourself, and I think that's such a major thing in war that, I mean, everybody kind of focuses on themselves and they want to, like, you know, protect their families, their pets, whatnot. And I think that's such a big reason why I wanted to go for as well. And yeah, so that's just something I wanted to say.
And let's take it from another angle. War means that people have to go out to fight in one way, shape or form. Now, whether that's in front of a computer or whether it's actually out on the ground. And that means that there's a thing called military conscription, and a number of countries, and particularly in Scandinavian countries at the moment, but others as well, are saying, well, our population, our young population, will be obliged to take 2 months, 6 weeks, a year, whatever, in various countries to country. And it's not Some are saying it's obligatory, others saying it's voluntary. There's a choice that every one of you might one day have to consider. Which direction would you go? A difficult one, I know. Which one would you do?
I mean, it is a point I would have liked to touch on. And yes, there's a lot of talk about conscripting and drafting starting up, and that will take away a lot of time from the youthful population. Time that could be spent working on their own future, especially in environmental sectors. But I think it is hard to tell because we are very much invested. It is literally our future. So it's hard to tell in this moment.
So the idea is that if your country, for example in Spain, you can say we're definitely living in a democratic country. War can, in any country, can threaten that. And the only people who can change that is the ones who stand up and say, I'm fighting for my country. James is nodding over there. It's a difficult one, but it's likely. It might just happen, because I think probably a number of people are not necessarily Spanish nationality. You know, you might come from other parts of Europe, so you may go back to your home country in due course. But any thoughts from BIC over there? Naomi, what do you think?
To what?
Would you actually, if it was obligatory, you don't have a choice, but if it was voluntary, would you say no, or would you say yes? So go for a 2 months training, for example. We're not talking about going into war.
I don't really know.
Britain are talking about it at the moment. No, it's not easy, but it's maybe give you a thought, something for thought, because if all these things are getting closer, it might be that none of you ever have to make that choice. But a lot of young people in Europe will.
Maybe. I was in Palma with some friends and we saw these people walking through Palma, and then we realized it was the Navy because they were over, the big ship from the US. So yeah.
There was a huge one in, I think I had about, I don't know, I can't remember, 5,000 special forces on board. Apparently it's the biggest one in the world, I don't know. And now you've got a little one in from Britain, I think, at the moment. I don't know how many is on board. Yes?
I think if I have a choice, if I will have to make a choice, and if I would have to make a choice, hopefully I will, I would never do it. I never want to hold a gun in my hands ever. I never want even to suppose or imagine a possibility that I'll ever have to take someone else's life. So I wouldn't even want to do training, to be honest. I get all of it, defending your country, your people. But to be honest, I've always lacked the nationalism. There was never any nationalism.
So if you were a young person in Ukraine,
But there's other ways you volunteer instead. You can work in the medical corps or the back group or whatever. So you have to serve your country. Maybe not in a military, a primary military kind of role.
Yeah, I guess maybe when you were the victim, it's different. Because then maybe. But if I come from the country of the aggressor, I'd never even. I don't know, even if I was forced to, I'd rather go to prison than pick up a gun and go to and kill innocent.
well, there's a clear statement from a young person there.
Definitely.
There is a very good, clear statement. Both done. Yeah.
They weren't as motivated or serious as I expected them to be. I thought, I don't know, I sort of seen the military, he'd be so proper and efficient, and have so much to say. And it was just
They were probably just higher.
They were just higher. There's a Yankees cap on, they started talking about the Yankees. They were trying to we hold Jones sometimes. I was like,
They're
okay.
regular young guys then.
Yeah, they're pretty regular.
They're not fanatics. Lynn, I think it's a really interesting subject. Thank you very much for all your participation. Anybody? Ron, you've been quiet there. Would you like to give a little summary, your usual?
Okay, I'm trying to work out this thing about the environment and war. Okay, so when the bombs are dropping, realistically, people are not picking up their pot plants and trying to save them, are they?
Mhm.
So we have a situation where the realism is you've got the three biggest countries in the world who are the worst polluters.
Mhm.
So do they care? No.
Well, certainly the business
That's
wise.
the reality of it,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, on that negative note, I think the judges are coming back. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
I just make a very quick point. So we did have a very hard debate amongst ourselves today because both sides are very strong. I just want to say something very quickly about points of information because I've done a few of these debates now, and I kind of have seen good ones and bad ones. And I thought today you both did very well with your points of information, with your handling of it, because you both were very polite. I don't think there's anyone who wasn't. So you're very polite in your handling, you weren't dismissive, you directly spoke to the person who asked the question. And it was quite refreshing actually, there was not any dismissive, it was all polite. And yeah, I thought that was very well handled. So well done, you all on that one.
Yeah, we had a tough discussion downstairs. I think it was a difficult topic today. I think there were some debaters who did really well in picking up only a part of that big topic, otherwise we could be sitting here hours. I think also we were very lucky to see very different styles of discussing and presenting, and who were walking around, and Naomi being rather cool about it, and Indigo. Everybody had their own very different style. I think also we did see a lot of reading today compared to other debates, which shows that the topic was really difficult, also on facts and statistics. I would like to point out that it's not always that we see that a team is so strongly behind the topic as it was your case today. It was very emotional. You could see that you are very convinced about against the topic, let's say that way, and you could feel it, which doesn't mean that the tools of the debater, we are talking about something else, not about the paperwork. It's just the emotion that strongly came over to us, more than other times that we debate. That was it.
Wow. Well, it is that time to come up with the answers to these important questions. Who is the best debater and who is the best team? Honestly, we have been at loggerheads downstairs. Very difficult subject as mentioned, and wonderful different styles as mentioned. Great use of visual aids. You must be full up of chocolate Rocher for wonderful. And I think it's only important to say, Sienna, it had no influence, the fact, it did not show one bit that you have stepped in last minute. Huge congratulations. Honest to God, it was really beautifully done. There was reading, but you constantly made eye contact. That is very good. I think, obviously, as Hannah said, it's a tricky subject, and there are things that to remember it all, especially when your POIs are coming in quite a lot. We have to remember that there have to be important POIs. The amount doesn't necessarily mean that is always the right way to go, just to put that out there, but they were very good points of interests. And I think what I will go home with out of this debate, because it's a fascinating subject, actually came from you, Marlo. Voice of the planet cannot speak for itself. I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful line, actually. Wonderful. I'm waffling on. Slow down a little bit. I should take note myself. Slow down a little bit. There were some fast speakers. And again, when you're reading, if you can at least make some eye contact, that really does help. We were at loggerheads about the pacing, in all honesty, because Marla, I had the opportunity to see you, Hugo, in BIC, and there you stood firm and strong, Personally, we were at loggerheads about this. Personally, I preferred, with this kind of a debate, a more solid thing. I found it perhaps a little distracting, but nevertheless, your content all across the board, fascinating. I've learned a lot today. It's always an honour to come here to the debates. Best debater today, by 1 point, Inigo, by 1 point is you. And again, very, very close. Well, not as close as in fairness to the individual debating, but the point that the girls, I feel, I'm obviously giving it away, the Academy were the best debaters today as a team, school team debating, because of their use of the involvement of the whole team and contributing and picking up on everything that was going on. But so much potential, honestly, I can't wait to see more from you all. Thank you so much. Congratulations.